In a few short moments, you'll discover the hidden brilliance, mystery, and power behind real-life ninjas, those invisible assassins who moved like shadows through history. Our guide into this secret world is Shinji Kagawa, a true ninja who lives in a quiet little village called Koko, just a few hundred kilometers away from Japan's capital, Tokyo. The year is 1490. Around Shinji stretches a simple, peaceful village, the kind you could imagine in any story of old Japan. People herd sheep, tend rice fields, sip warm sake during cold evenings, share legends by the fire, and play an addictively clever card game known as koru. But there's something strange about Koko. Even the most ruthless bandits would never dare to step foot here. Why? Because everyone in this village, men, women, even children, are ninjas. So feared are they that local rulers send gifts to Shinji and his family, hoping to stay in their good graces. Samurai. That medieval Japan lived under a strict class hierarchy. At the top stood the samurai, those with the divine right to kill at will. Below them were merchants, farmers, artisans, and others who kept society running. And at the very bottom were the barakumen, the outcasts, considered less than human. But ninjas? They didn't belong to any class. They were ghosts in a world obsessed with order. Like many of his kin, Shinji Kagawa lives apart from the rest of society, in a place where he can be anyone. A farmer, a trader, even a samurai if needed. Most ninjas lived double lives, hiding behind simple masks of everyday people. Shinji's clan, the Kagawa family, is part of the legendary alliance known as the 53 Clans of Koko, named after their very village, a small yet powerful enclave that still exists to this day. In modern Japan, there's even a theme park where you can live like a ninja for a day. Sounds exciting, doesn't it? But let's be honest, that's just a show. You put on a tight costume, throw a few shuriken, crawl through an obstacle course, and snap a couple of photos for social media. Fun, sure, but nothing close to what real ninjas were. Our Shinji, his family, and the legendary alliance of the 53 clans had far greater tasks. From the 10th to the 17th century, nearly 700 years, Japan was a land divided. Dozens of feudal lords ruled their provinces like miniature kingdoms, locked in endless wars for power and survival. In such a world, everyone sought an advantage, a way to strike unseen, to sabotage enemies, to win wars without drowning the land in blood. And that advantage came in the form of the shinobi, the people we now call ninjas. That's why these mysterious warriors were allowed to live apart from ordinary folks. No one dared disturb them. No one questioned their presence. But calling Shinji a ninja isn't entirely correct. In his time, they were known as shinobi no mano, or simply shinobi. The term ninja actually came from China, when the Chinese read the same Japanese symbol for shinobi. They pronounced it ninja. It was through them that the legend of these shadow warriors spread across the world. Even so, labeling Shinji an assassin would be a mistake. A true shinobi was first and foremost a spy, a master of infiltration and deception. Assassination made up barely 10% of their work. The rest? Espionage, stealing secret plans, setting fires, poisoning water supplies, the invisible art of war. The ninjas you see at festivals or in movies? They wouldn't last a moment against someone like Shinji Kagawa. Because true ninjas weren't made, they were born. Shinji's training began almost as soon as he took his first breath. Can you imagine parents so determined they turned infancy into a lesson? The Kagawa father and mother tied a small cradle in a corner and rocked it until the baby thudded softly against the sides, not to harm him, but to teach him an instinct. Over and over they swung him, letting him bump and rebound, until the child learned, by reflex, to curl and protect himself from bruises. As the bruises piled up, the lessons grew tougher. They spun him, flipped him, dropped him gently from every conceivable angle, not cruelty, but discipline. After countless knocks and tumbles, little Shinji learned to land in a way that broke nothing, and so he moved on to the next stage. And before you picture mere physical hardship, no, this was not a Spartan drill. The true training of a shinobi was as much intellect as iron. Reading, science, craft. A ninja had to be a walking repository of cunning. Could you make an explosive from a tennis racket and an empty can? Shinji could. Chemistry was his tool, maps and military charts were his language, codes and hidden writings were puzzles he loved to solve. He was also a consummate actor, a merchant one moment, a peasant the next, a samurai or a teapot maker if the role required it. Deception was a trade, disguise, the art. Modern ninja schools? They teach flashy moves and stage tricks. But the real shinobi was closer to the perfect spy than to a ring fighter. Ninjutsu, in its truest sense, was a doctrine of results. Achieve your goal by any means necessary. Hand-to-hand fighting was taught, yes, but it was rarely the focus. Why expend energy throwing punches when a single well-placed bullet or a cleverly set trap could finish the job? Instead, masters concentrated on subtler, more lethal skills. Night vision, for example, was drilled into Shinji from the earliest age. They would place a small boy into a cave lit only by a torch. Later the torch became a candle. And later still, there was nothing at all. The aim? To make darkness a companion, not a handicap. After all, why risk a grueling skirmish if you can blind your opponent and vanish? There was even a specific exercise designed for that end, one that taught a child to use shadow as cloak and escape as weapon. A strange little test awaited every young shinobi. A hat was placed against his chest and held there by the master's hands. When the instructor sprinted away, the child had to remain perfectly still. If the gusts of wind failed to dislodge the hat from his chest during the run, it meant his speed and technique were acceptable. Small, subtle trials like that built the reflexes that would later decide whether a man lived or died. One of the biggest myths about ninjas is their outfit. In reality, on roughly 90% of missions, Shinji dressed exactly like a common peasant. No dramatic black suits, no flashy katana. Such items invited questions and danger. A sword announces itself the moment you step into a checkpoint. Which lord did you serve? Who are you? Far safer to carry a sickle disguised as a farming tool than to parade as a warrior. Shinji's favorite weapon was the kusarigama, a sickle attached to a long chain. In skilled hands it could sever a limb, or do the job far more decisively. But its genius lay in disguise. Taken apart, the kusarigama could pass for ordinary agricultural gear, perfect for slipping past guards during wartime checkpoints. Those theatrical midnight suits you see in plays? Forget them. Real shinobi favored earth tones, brown, ash, dark gray, colors that dissolved into dusk. Not every clan even wore ornate garments. Many preferred plain, practical clothing that helped them vanish into the landscape. Practicality was the shinobi's creed. They stood at the cutting edge of technology, adopting early firearms, metal knuckles, and other ingenious devices long before they became common. They studied every martial art not to admire it, but to expose its weaknesses. The skills perfected to true excellence were the quiet ones. Strikes from behind, methods of rendering a target senseless, precise use of poisons, and brutal work in cramped corridors, the arts that made a shinobi both invisible and deadly. Modern ninja masters with their choreographed kicks and flashy moves wouldn't last a single minute in a real fight. Shinji, on the other hand, spent nearly 200 of the 365 days in a year training. The rest of his time he lived the quiet life of a farmer. To any wandering European, his village would have seemed ordinary, perhaps even dull. But every local lord knew exactly where to turn when things became complicated. The system was simple. Imagine this: the feudal lord of Tokyo, Sun Hen-min, is preparing for war against his rival Taikyu Sei-Kubo of Fuji. Word spreads that the Fuji army is 3 times larger. Sun Hen-min sighs and sends a delegation to Koko, the hidden village of the shinobi. The delegation resembles a moving treasure chest, carts loaded with gold, food, and fine goods. Upon arrival, they present these offerings to the respected ninja clans of Koko, politely asking for help. If the price feels right, the clans agree, and Shinji's family, the Kagawa, is called for a briefing. After a quiet meeting, a plan takes shape. They will strike not with swords, but with whispers. The idea is to spread a rumor that Sun Hen-min, the Tokyo lord, is protected by the elements themselves, that even the forces of nature fight by his side. And who would dare march to war against the wind and the rain? Shinji packs his few belongings and heads toward the city of Fuji, a fortress more than a town. But would the guards ever suspect a poor peasant, wearing a straw hat and carrying a sickle on his back, of being anything other than a refugee fleeing the chaos of war? Of course not. Once inside, Shinji blends in perfectly. He rents a cramped bed in a farmer's hostel crowded with 100 workers and spends his evenings chatting about harvests, soil, and the best season for rice planting. Beneath that harmless disguise, however, he scouts the city, quietly collecting the materials needed to set it ablaze. He even plants the seed of the rumor himself, telling fellow laborers that his brother in Tokyo spoke of strange news, that Lord Sun Hen Min has allied with the forces of nature, and that this is only the beginning. The workers gossip, and by the next dawn, the whole city buzzes with the tale. While Shinji continued his shadowy work, he took out a weapons dealer, assumed his identity, and slipped unnoticed into a samurai camp. There, he quietly gathered everything he needed: names of commanders, the layout of their homes, the routes they used, even the smallest details others would overlook. Whispers began to spread, rumors that the rough men from Tokyo had mastered the very elements themselves. With his trusted sickle, Shinji eliminated the Iga clan ninjas who served under Fuji Cipher, then infiltrated the residence of a local warlord. From there, he stole maps, supply records, and detailed plans of the upcoming assault. And for a final touch, he dipped part of a general's clothing in gunpowder. During a public speech, one spark from Shinji's concealed blowpipe was enough to ignite the fabric. In seconds, the general burst into flames, dying in unimaginable agony. The ruler of Kubo was convinced this was the work of rival samurai, while the entire city buzzed with fear. No one dared challenge warriors capable of such dark cunning. The army's morale shattered, there would be no organized war. By the time confusion reigned, Shinji had already returned to Koko, carrying every stolen plan in secret. Sounds like something straight out of a James Bond film, doesn't it? Yet, this could easily have been just another day in the life of Shinji Kagawa, or any shinobi like him. These were not the ancestors of modern martial artists proudly wearing belts. The ninja were the forefathers of elite spies, experts in infiltration, sabotage, and deception, centuries ahead of their time. While samurai preached the code of Bushido, the ninja followed only one rule: the mission must come first. Dying without completing it was considered failure. Unlike the assassins of the West, honor meant nothing without results. Even the old legend claiming that ninjas could walk on water, as unbelievable as it sounds, was not a myth, but a fragment of truth. The shinobi were clever beyond their time. They even invented a primitive form of water skis, tying bundles of reed paddles to their feet. With enough skill, they could glide silently across lakes and rivers, turning nature itself into an ally. But the stories about ritual suicides? Pure fiction. If Shinji had ever refused one of Fuji's missions, nothing would have happened to him. Ninjas weren't fanatics, they avoided unnecessary risks that could endanger the clan. Death came only for those who betrayed their brothers by abandoning the clan or revealing its secrets. In such cases, justice was swift and delivered by their own. Ironically, it was these very ninjas who helped the legendary Tokugawa shogunate unite Japan under a single rule. Yet once peace settled in, around the year 1620, their skills were no longer needed. The same Tokugawa who had used them now turned their image into one of disgrace. Public burnings, executions, and forced secrecy followed. Those who survived adapted. They blended into ordinary life, becoming merchants, farmers, craftsmen. Their once feared teachings were erased, and what remained was only theater. Stagehands dressed in black, changing scenes in the shadows, unknowingly preserved the image of the ninja costume we see in modern films today. The true art of ninjutsu vanished. No school in Japan can prove a direct link to those original, hardcore super spies. Yet, isn't that exactly the point? The essence of the ninja was to make the world believe they never truly existed. Until next time, my friends.